Hi everybody and welcome. In this video we are going to create this cool 3D flipping effect using only HTML and CSS. So let's jump right into it. So here I am in VS Code, and as you can see I've already set up a simple project with an index HTML and a style CSS. For my HTML, as you can see, we have a card container which basically contains all of the markup for my card. Then we have another container called card inner, and we'll see into the CSS why we even have the need for this extra layer. Then we just have our two divs which represent the front and the back faces of our card. For the front we just have a header section with this cool background pattern, and we just have my name, my age, and my country. As for my back, we just have a nice little paragraph which says something very true, which is CSS is awesome. For my CSS, I just set up a bunch of custom properties for my colors, my fonts, and my border radius. Then we have some basic resets and some general styles for my body. Then we have the styles for both the front of the card and the back of it, so that we can fully focus into the main topic of this video, which of course is the actual flipping effect. So let's start with our card inner container, and we'll give it a width of 100% and height of 100% so that it fills up the space given by its parent, which is the card itself. And then we can also say that it must be relatively positioned, because we'll want our front and our back to be absolutely positioned with respect to this element. We can add a nice box shadow, so we'll say 0, 0 for the offset on the X and the Y axis. Then we'll have 10 pixels for the radius and a color dark gray for the color, which we set up as a custom property. Then we can have a border radius too. So border radius is also a custom property, and that's pretty much it for our card inner. Now we can move to the front and the back faces, so card front and card back, and we start by saying that they're both absolutely positioned, so position absolute, and they will occupy all the space their parent is giving them, and we can say this by just throw an instead of 0 on them. As you can see, they're now both stacking on top of each other, and that's because they're absolutely positioned and occupy the same space. Now we'll add some background too, so background color is white. We'll have some border radius too, so border radius is card border radius. Now clearly something's off, because we want the front of the card to be on top of everything, while the back of it should be flipped and not visible actually. So let's start by making the back actually flipped over. So we'll say that card back has a transform of rotate over the y-axis, which is the vertical axis, of 180 degrees, which can be written in a more concise way using the turn unit. So 180 degrees are actually half a turn. So now that we have flipped the back of the card, we actually want to hide this side, because we are facing the front of the card, so the back of it should be hidden. We will need a property that allows us to hide the back side of an element. And turns out CSS can do just that with a property called backface-visibility. So we'll just came here into our card front and card back selector, and we'll throw a backface-visibility, and of course it has two values. One is visible, which is the default, and the other one is hidden, which is actually what we want here. So now it's time to actually add the hover effect, and we can do that by targeting our card in the hover state, and inside of it our card inner. Here we say that we want a rotation over the y-axis, so transform is rotate over the y-axis of half a turn. And basically here you can see why we needed this inner container in the first place. To actually understand this better, let's put a transition on the card inner container, transition over the transform property for, let's say, 500 milliseconds with an Nielsen curve of is out. So as you can see, if I were to put my hover state on the card inner itself, I would have some glitchy stuff going on, and that's because I am hovering on something which is rotating, so the hover effect can sometimes disappear. So we'll just say that our card is always still while our card inner is the one rotating. As you can see, the effect is not actually what we expected, and that's because the rotation currently is not being performed in a 3D space. And that's where we need to bring in a new property called transform style. And yeah, basically transform style property sets whether children of an element are positioned in the 3D space or are flattened in the plane of the element. We can give this property two values. Flat indicates that the children of the element are lying in the same plane of the element itself. It's the default value and nothing changes if we set this value. The actual value that we want here is preserve 3D, and this value indicates that the children of the element should be positioned in the 3D space. So now the rotation is actually happening correctly, but as you can see, it lacks some perspective. And that's because we never set any perspective at all on our scene. So we are going to do just that by using the perspective property on the card element. And the perspective property basically defines how far the object is away from the user. And a lower value will result in a more intensive 3D effect, while a higher value will result in a less intensive effect. So if I were to choose, for example, 10 pixel for my value, as you can see, the effect is way too much exaggerated here. And on the other end, if I were to choose something like 10,000 pixels, yeah, the effect, it's there, but it's not really remarkable. It's almost as it wasn't even there, actually. We generally want to stick with something in between. Something like 800 pixels will do the job. And yeah, that's the final result, and I think that's pretty much close to what we actually aimed for. That was my CSS implementation for this simple card flipping effect. All the code will be linked down in the description, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next video.